Hello again. I'm David, and today is May 15th. We're doing 2 Samuel chapters 13 through 15. In 2 Samuel 11 and 12, we learned about David's sin with Bathsheba and his subsequent murder of Uriah. You may recall that Nathan the prophet went to David and exposed his sin and told him that God would raise up evil against his own household. Well, evil continues in our reading today. Absalom, David's son by his fourth wife, Micah, had a beautiful sister named Tamar. She was a virgin, and she had caught the eye of Absalom's brother Amnon, David's son by his second wife, Ahinoam. So technically, he desired his own sister, his father's daughter. Creepy, right? Well, it gets stranger. David's older brother, Shimei, had a son named Jonadab, who was friends with Amnon, so that would make them cousins. So we have two sons of David, a daughter of David, and a nephew of David. Well, in verse 3, Jonadab was called a shrewd man. Now, the word shrewd has two connotations. One is very positive, denoting someone who is astute, with a good mind, and prone to make wise and good decisions. The other is very negative, denoting one who is clever, cunning, and calculating. Guess which one Jonadab is? Well, Amnon is so taken over by his lust for his sister that he and Jonadab come up with a plan for Amnon to fake his illness and request his sister to attend him. And when she does, Amnon sends everybody away from him and maneuvers Tamar into a situation to where she becomes a victim of rape. Tamar begs Amnon not to do such a thing and even suggests that David would not withhold her from him, only don't force this shame upon her. But there's a big problem. Besides Amnon forcing himself on Tamar. Back in Leviticus 18:9, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your sister, your father's daughter, your mother's daughter, whether brought up in the family or in another home. So not only did Amnon sin against his sister, but he sinned against God, breaking his laws. But before we get too judgmental here, we should remember that David already violated God's commandments in Leviticus 18:20. You shall not lie sexually with your neighbor's wife and make yourself become unclean with her. Remember what Nathan told David about God bringing evil on his house? Well, I think this qualifies. There's a lot more to this story and how Amnon treated Tamar, even worse, but you'll have to read about that if you haven't already. Now, Absalom loved his sister Tamar, and he gave her refuge in his house to protect her from the public scorn that was sure to follow. But we see that Absalom is a patient man, and he'll hatch a plan to take revenge on Amnon. 2 years later, he throws a big party for his brothers and guests and tells the servants, hey, when Amnon's drank too much, kill him. And they did. More evil on the house of David. As a result, Absalom has to go into exile for 3 years. But David's heart longed for Absalom despite what he did to Amnon. Now we have Joab entering the picture. Now, Joab is David's commander, and he comes up with a plot of his own. He hires a woman to pretend to be a widow that had 2 sons, one that killed another. Now, the one living son is the only heir left to carry on the father's name, but the avenger of blood is sworn to kill him. Well, David rules that he'll provide protection for the living son, the only survivor and heir, and his life will be spared. But he becomes suspicious, and he seems to feel like he's being manipulated with this whole story, and finally asks her, did Joab put you up to this? And of course she admits he did. More evil, lies, and deceit. It just keeps going on. So why did Joab stick his neck out for Absalom? Was it because David longed for Absalom and was just because he was close to Absalom? It's not really clear what Joab's motive is here. But we'll see later on in 2 Samuel that no matter what the reason is, Joab and Absalom will have a falling out, and it doesn't end so well for Absalom. So Absalom returns to his father's house, although David wouldn't see him at first. By and by, he plots to overthrow his father and even pulls in some of the army, some of the priests, some of the chief counselors of the king over to his side. Eventually, David has to flee the city along with the family and his loyal followers in fear of Absalom, who wants to kill them all. This pattern of deceit, betrayal, lying, switching allegiances, it keeps on happening. Nathan had told David that men would openly sleep with his wives, and we see that this comes true when Absalom goes into his father's concubines. Things like this continue for most of the rest of 2 Samuel. And with Joab's help, he finally reconciles with David. Or does he? Absalom continues to bring evil to the household of David. Absalom's a handsome man. He's a charming man. He's a smooth talker and a bit arrogant. He even has 50 guys who pull him around in a chariot. He hangs around at the gate and he intercepts those people who are going to meet the king and makes rulings on their issues without David's knowledge. But notice that after God had sent Nathan to David with the message that he'll have evil come upon his household, God's mostly been silent. God's not removed his hand from David, and he's not stopped blessing David, although it may not be apparent. But David has brought these things, these consequences, on himself because of his sin. Even though God does forgive him and still accepts him, he continues to honor his covenant to always have someone from his house sitting on his throne. The consequences remain. This may not be the most encouraging story that we'll read this year as we go through the Bible together, but it serves as a reminder that any of us can commit sin and become reconciled with God after we repent, just as David did. But it never means that there won't be a price to pay. Thank God that he sent his son Jesus to remove the penalty of sin from us by taking it upon himself. However, the trouble that is caused by our sin may still bring shame and hardship that we may have to endure. It's only by God's mercy and grace that we don't receive all that we truly deserve. So until tomorrow, keep reading, and we'll see what happens with David's life as we continue on. See you tomorrow, friends.